Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jessie Ryan, Executive Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity. This webinar is going to begin shortly, and we'll have an opportunity for individuals to participate in the conversation by uploading their questions in the chat box. Again, the webinar for Chutes or Ladders, Strengthening California Community College Transfer so that more students earn the degrees they seek will be beginning in the next few minutes. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Campaign for College Opportunities webinar on the release of our report, Chutes or Ladders, Strengthening California Community College Transfer so more students earn the degrees they seek. I'm Jessie Ryan, Executive Vice President of the Campaign for College Opportunity, an organization that had a laser focus on improving racial equity in higher education and working to ensure that all students have an equal opportunity to access and succeed in college. I'm also a proud product of California community colleges, and today's conversation around strengthening community college transfer is deeply personal to me. As the daughter of a struggling single welfare mother, community colleges truly were my gateway to opportunity, as they are for the vast majority of students across the state. I was able to successfully transfer within 2 years by attending 3 colleges simultaneously to get the credits I needed so that I could enter a California State University system. After the point of transfer, my mother became homeless and I was faced with a dilemma: drop out or continue on. If I stopped out, my credits did not align with the requirements necessary to get an associate's degree to show for my work, and therefore I would have left with nothing. I was fortunate. I was not only one of fewer than 3% that successfully transferred within 2 years, but was told by my mother that I needed to pursue my college dreams and walk across that stage with a degree to show for my work, and I did. Today, we are going to talk about Chutes or Ladders, strengthening community college transfer so that more students earn the degrees they seek. We know that community college transfer is an opportunity to level the playing field for students across the state. California envisioned a system of colleges and universities that were accessible to all. They envisioned the community college system as being the primary path to access post-secondary education and help students achieve their college dreams. Catalyzed by the 1960 master plan, this established transfer as one of the primary functions at the community college system. 10 years ago, the Campaign for College Opportunity shepherded historic transfer reform to create an associate's degree for transfer that would streamline the transfer process from community colleges to the CSU, ensure a 60-unit path to transfer with junior standing and guaranteed admission at the California State University system. While we've seen a reduction in units and some tremendous success, in particular for our Latinx students. We recognize that regional disparities and racial inequities remain, and that much more must be done to fix a broken transfer system. While we appreciate the efforts of the community college system through initiatives like the Vision for Success and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force that came forth from that work, as well as the Recovery with Equity Task Force and the laser focus on streamlining transfer pathways and aligning credits so that more students reach their college dreams. We recognize that there is an urgent imperative to do more to ensure that all students, irrespective of where they live in the state, have an equal opportunity to reach their transfer and baccalaureate goals. Today, we are going to have the chance to hear from a panel of experts who will talk about their experiences in the field with strengthening community college transfer to lift up a truly student-centered path. But first, we're going to walk through the findings of our new report, Chutes or Ladders. I'm happy to say that as part of this, we are going to have an opportunity to, after hearing from Dr. Vikash Reddy, engage in not only a panel conversation, but questions from panelists and participants who are participating in today's webinar. So please, throughout today's webinar and the slides that will be presented by Dr. Vikash Reddy, don't hesitate to enter your questions into the chat board because we will get to them at the latter point of the conversation. We're also going to talk about statewide solutions for addressing some of the persistent inequities in transfer. And we're going to hear from statewide transfer champion, Assemblymember Mark Berman, who has been at the forefront of encouraging courageous dialogues on how best to simplify a student-centered transfer pathway that meets the needs of both students and the state. But first, we're going to hear from Dr. Vikash Reddy, the Senior Director of Policy Advocacy Research at the Campaign for College Opportunity and the primary author of today's very important report. Vikash, thank you so much for your efforts.
Thanks, Jesse. And Jesse, don't sell your role short. You were a fabulous co-author. And so, today's work also bears your name. And I want to say thank you to our panelists for joining us and to our audience members for joining us today. I would invite you all to head to our website and download the report if you haven't already. I would note that these things are useful only if folks are sharing them, consuming them, using them in their advocacy. And also, in addition to your questions here today, we're engaging on social media using the hashtag Transforming Twitter. And so we invite you to join the conversation online there as well. And just to set the stage for the conversation today, transfer is a critical portion of the California higher education landscape. The master plan of 1965 set out a vision for higher education in California that involved a robust transfer pathway. The reality, however, is that it's been a little bit complicated and confusing for students, right? And so even though we have, the admirable goal of associate degrees for students that do have labor market values, the value of a bachelor's degree is over $1 million compared to a high school diploma over the course of a lifetime, right? Personal social mobility really is dependent on this. And that's the reality that we'll show in a few slides, is that most students entering the community colleges declare a degree or transfer goal as their reason for going to the community colleges. Too often, however, duplicative course requirements or lack of access to the right course advisors mean that the process depends a little bit more on luck than it should. A strong transfer pathway is also really very important to the state's minoritized populations. If we look at just the first year students from the fall of 2019 data that we have from IPEDS, the largest group across racial and ethnic subgroups and the majority of Black and 2/3 of Latinx students are beginning their journeys in California at a California community college, right? So the pathway for the majority of these students to a 4-year degree is going to go through a transfer process. And this is, like I say, true for all racial and ethnic subgroups. The largest share enroll in the community colleges, if not most. The next slide shows us too that across racial and ethnic subgroups, this is work from our friends at the Public Policy Institute in California. Degree and transfer goals are declared as like I said, the goal for Latinx students, for Black students, for white students, for Asian American students. 77 to 79% of students declaring degree or transfer as a goal. But if you look at the outcomes, the transfer-related outcomes that they track across as late as 4 years, you'll see that disparities open up in terms of the transfer pathway. And by the time you get to that ultimate outcome of actually transferring, 27% of Asian American students, 17% of white students, 10% of Latinx students, and 9% of Black students are transferring after 4 years. And that's when we're looking at, in terms of a population that across the board, more than 3/4 of them have said, degree or transfer is my goal. Thinking generally about transfer rates, right? If we look at students who started at the California community colleges in the 2012-13 academic year, and subsequently within 6 years completed at least 12 credits and attempted transfer level English or math, after 6 years, a lengthy time frame, even for part-time students, 4 in 10 have transferred to a 4-year institution. Right, and this is important to note too, that we're talking here about students who completed 12 credits and attempted transfer level English and math. This metric leaves out students who previously might have been locked into remedial course sequences and never attempted transfer level coursework at all. The report from PPIC that I just referenced noted that for students who enrolled in the subsequent year, 2013-14, in 6 years, 39%, according to this definition, transferred to a 4-year institution. So roughly similar to this cohort. But when we look at students who actually declare an intent to transfer or earn a degree, that number goes down to 28%, transferring within 6 years. Right, so let me say that again. When we look simply at students who declare as their goal transfer and or a degree, about 1 in 4 are transferring within 6 years. So we have some work to do. And we've got work to do. We made progress on the post-transfer end. And the next graph, you'll see that now, the trend at the Cal States for 2-year graduation rates for transfer students after they've transferred has gone from 28% to 44%. And that's a big growth. And I think one that we ought to be celebrating. But I think it's important to note that when we think about the transfer process as being 2 years at a community college and 2 years at a 4-year, fewer than half of students who are transferring in are graduating within 2 years at the Cal States. Slightly better at the UC and there too also upward trajectory. So we want to make sure we continue that upward trajectory. And as we'll show, I think, the ADT may be a way to help us get there. So the ADT, the Associate Degree for Transfer. Looking at this data from about 10 years ago, there was a knowledge that we needed to look at the pathway and that we needed to do what we could to shore up the pathway for students. And again, live up to this master plan's vision of a robust way from community colleges to a 4-year degree. And so the Campaign for College Opportunity advocated for this degree, and one that would, once a student earns it, with 60 units, not 90 or more, as was often the case for previous sets of students, but with 60 units at the community college and then 60 units at the 4-year university, would guarantee an automatic standing at the CSU as a junior, allowing students to complete within 2 years, and would be seamless, so that when students start on their pathway, they have a set of expectations that they can meet and live up to. And we've seen, I think, as the next few slides will show, great progress and tremendous success with this degree. The first is looking at credit accumulation. And so this is work that was done by researchers at the Wheelhouse Center for Community College Leadership. And what they did is they looked at students who had earned only ADTs and only terminal associate degrees. And they also looked at the sets of students who earned both degrees or who hadn't after a certain number of years earned a degree yet, and show us the degree or the credit differential. And it looks like that students earning ADTs are doing so with about 6.5 fewer credits as they graduate than students who are graduating with terminal degrees. You know, at 6.5 fewer credits, that's a real cost savings to the state in terms of tuition. It's a savings to students in terms of time. But I think it's also important to note that at 85.4, we're still about 25 units over kind of the vision for a 60-unit pathway. So progress for sure, but we think that there are still steps that we need to take to continue to chip away at this gap. We're also seeing that the ADT is growing in terms of the number of students who are earning the degree and the percentage of associate degree earners who are walking away with this degree. And so consistently over the past a few years, a greater share of associate degree earners are ADT earners. And you know, we're very close to half of the population, or actually the population of graduates. When we put those last two slides together, and do, you know, some back of the envelope, as it were, calculations, you know, it's clear to us that we're saving, as I said a few minutes ago, quite a bit of money. So if we think about the set of students, now I acknowledge that, you know, we've done our best to account for students who earn multiple degrees, and for sure we make a few assumptions, but at 6.5 credits per student, you know, we estimate that already in that set of students graduating with ADTs, we've saved over $10 million in terms of tuition costs. We think that if we can bump that up from 48% and get some of those students who had earned terminal degrees where maybe an ADT would have been a more appropriate and efficient degree, and get from 48% to 50%, we could save another $666,000 in terms of tuition costs. Setting, you know, the sky is the limit, an 80% conferral, $11.5 million, you know, just at that 6.5 unit savings. But you know, I like to dream big as a researcher and think about what would happen if we made it to that 60-unit pathway. If it was a 60-unit pathway and we stayed at current levels of conferral, that could have been an additional $40 million, $40.6 million in terms of savings. And you know, the big dream of an 80% conferral at a 60-unit pathway, you know, an additional $97 million that we could invest in counseling and advising, in student financial aid and basic needs, and in so many of the ways that, you know, that we know that we need to support students. And so, you know, even if we can get halfway there, $50 million a year is a lot of money to save. Also important to note that students with an ADT who transfer and are on a guaranteed pathway when they arrive at the Cal State University, more than half are finishing within 2 years of transferring. And even among students who earn an ADT but they're not on a guaranteed pathway, 47% graduating within 2 years. And remember, a few slides earlier, I showed you a CSU, an average of 44%. So you know, we believe that we're seeing savings to students on this side of the transfer process as well, and clear savings for students who are on that guaranteed pathway. You know, it seems like it's working, and here too we are encouraged by the growth trajectory in all of these lines. I think, you know, we want to make sure that more students are on that top line of graduating within 2 years on that guaranteed path. One thing that we do want to talk about also is access to these degrees for minoritized populations. More than half of Latinx degree earners in the 1920 year earned an ADT, and that we think is great. Looking at Black graduates, however, from 15% to 37% is absolutely a massive growth. But that still means that it's about 1 in 3 associate degree earners, Black associate degree earners are earning ADTs. And so, you know, wanting to ensure that colleges are offering ADTs in all pathways for which one has been approved, and they offer a terminal associate degree to ensure that students have access to these pathways, ensuring that students are advised into these pathways, you know, efficiently and effectively at the starts of their journeys. And for students who don't necessarily express one way or the other the interest, you know, ensuring that the ADT pathway is their pathway that you know, that we're set on unless there's a reason to deviate. Zooming out to just remind ourselves of why this is important. You know, when I started at the beginning of this conversation, I said, you know, that associate degrees absolutely confer value in terms of knowledge and return in the labor market. But the return to a bachelor's degree is clear. And this chart also makes clear that bachelor's degree attainment in California, it varies dramatically according to race ethnicity. And so ensuring that Latinx, American Indian, Alaskan Native students, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students, Black students have access to a robust transfer pathway. And as we noted, these students from these demographics are starting as freshmen at community colleges at higher rates, right? And so ensuring that robust transfer pathway really is critical to ensuring equity in bachelor's degree attainment in California. So I will turn it back over to Jesse in just a minute, but I think I will close by noting a few things that are sticking with me as we've written and produced this report. And at the community colleges, thinking about the credit savings, 6.5 units is not nothing. That's important. That's real savings, like I said, to students and to the system. But we can do better and we can do more. Ensuring that colleges offer all of the ADT pathways for which they have terminal associates in it, and there is an approved ADT. Currently 27 community colleges are at full implementation. I think the rest have between 1 and 5 degree pathways that could be implemented on their campus, but are not, but for which there is a terminal associate degree. And ensuring that this is the preferred pathway, thinking about this as, if we think that 77 or 75, 79% was the range across racial ethnic subgroups for declaring degree or transfer as their intent for enrollment, then it would make sense that the transfer pathway is the one that we point most students to right off the bat. At the CSU level, ensuring capacity is important, right? So if the CSU doesn't have enough seats for transfer students, we know that ADT students do get a GPA boost to help make their package more attractive as an applicant, but that's not the whole ballgame, right? And that GPA bump doesn't always do enough to overcome some of the impacts of capacity. And so place-constrained students who can't necessarily move to a 10 to 4 year, impaction is a problem there. Ensuring that CSU campuses have incoming pathways that are matched to approved ADTs so that students have the ability to enroll as, with automatic junior standing. And I acknowledge that takes work from articulation offices, and that takes work on both the CSU and the community college side. But again, looking at the rates at which on-track students are able to graduate, shoring up this pathway, we think really will help students get out in time. And making sure that they're on, a guaranteed path. And the last thing that I'll note is finding a way of tackling the high unit majors. And Jesse will talk a little bit more about that. But clearly in some of the STEM and health fields, the 60-60 caps, I think we need to talk about targeted ways to work around those. We'll note also that the transfer, the University of California enrolls a lot of transfer students every year, thousands of transfer students, in fact. And they have done a lot of work in the last few years to grow the number of pathways and articulation of those pathways, but there's still work to do insofar as those aren't always aligned. We know that high school students who are thinking about the University of California and the Cal State system have a common set of requirements in the A through G curriculum. Community college students who want to transfer, it's a lot more complicated. And so, oftentimes that's that part of what leads to some of these excess course patterns that we're seeing. And the pathways, the ADT has a guarantee of an associate degree and the guarantee of junior standing. There are fewer guarantees built into the UC transfers, not none, but fewer. They tend to be more targeted. And so finding ways to ensure that students don't have to ask the right questions at the beginning to get to the pathway and don't have to luck into the right advisor to climb that ladder, but that we make that really the default for all of our students. So I will stop there, but I will be back during the Q&A for any and all questions that folks have to pose, and I will turn it back over to Jesse.
Thank you so much, Vikash. We appreciate your illuminating overview of this very rich data. I want to touch upon a couple points as we talk about the policy recommendations in Chutes or Ladders. Recently, we had an opportunity to brief the Lieutenant Governor on some of the early findings of our transfer report. She was astonished and dismayed when confronted with the reality that fewer than 3% of community college transfer students will reach their goals within 2 years after entering the system. That 60% of our students, even after 6 years, will fail to be supported in reaching their transfer goal is equally egregious. Fortunately, we know that if we have the political will, vision, and willingness to lean into a set of transformational policy recommendations, we can do something to upend these troubling statistics, in particular, ensuring that we move away from the racial and regional inequities that continue to plague transfer in the state of California. So the first of our recommendations in Chutes or Ladders is a bold intersegmental vision for transfer. We know that we have to do much more to align the work that is happening between our systems of post-secondary education. That bold intersegmental vision should include clear goals and benchmarks for timely transfer and completion, with an intentional focus on reducing racial equity gaps. I cannot state that enough. We have to put racial equity at the center of each of the policies that we promote. We know that one key lever is aligning the lower division coursework from the CSU and the UC so that one lower division general ed pathway will prepare students for the maximum number of options when they transfer. We know that we have to have goals for annually increasing the number of students that are transferring to our public universities, but also to our private not-for-profit colleges, as they're so critical to meeting capacity and workforce needs. We also know that we need to decrease the number of excess units. You just heard Dr. Vikash Reddy talk about the reduction in excess units that we have seen with the ADT, and yet we are far from reaching 60 units so that we are maximizing timely completion. And finally, again, we have to have at the center of this bold intersegmental vision a strategy for reducing racial equity gaps across the state. The next of our policy recommendations settles around elevating the ADT as the preferred pathway for students across the state. Dr. Reddy spoke of this earlier. This was the vision of 1440. 1440 was intended to be the primary path by which students would access transfer, but we are far from reaching that goal. We know that part of our ability to meet that goal is in ensuring that our students beginning in high school understand their options to access the ADT. We know that we need to do more to support our counselors, our articulation officers, our faculty with training that helps them develop the tools they need to guide students on the pathway. We know that we need to prioritize the ADT for more students across the state, and we can do that by ensuring that all students who seek to transfer in a major where an ADT exists are put on that path. And then we can look at phasing out terminal associate degrees that don't give students maximum options or on-ramps to continue on their post-secondary pathways. Our next recommendation centers around STEM. Now, many of you have followed this dialogue over the course of multiple years. There has been an inability to build out the associate degree for transfer to ensure that we are growing the number of STEM offerings consistent with workforce demand. We have to identify where barriers to offering the associate degree for transfer in STEM exist and re-examine where it makes sense to remove the unit cap for the 60-unit lower division threshold for students seeking STEM degrees. We also have to do more to examine the industry relevance and align our ADT coursework with emerging fields so that we continue to grow the state's future workforce need. Our next recommendation is around the capacities, resources, and incentives needed to finally ensure that transfer is functioning in the way that the master plan of 1960 always envisioned. We know that we have to do more to ensure that our systems have the resources they need, in particular, our community college system, so that they are funded at parity with their CSU and UC counterparts, so that they can do everything within their power to create the supports necessary for students on that pathway. We have to fund the CSU and UC to have the seats necessary to honor the associate degree for transfer guarantee so that more students are both accessing the ADT and entering the four-year colleges with four-year junior standing. We have to encourage the UC, and I say encourage because of the constitutional autonomy. We cannot require the UC. We can only encourage the UC to accept the ADT pathway, recognizing that the UC acceptance of an ADT pathway would come with a higher GPA threshold. And finally, we have to do everything in our power to ensure that all students have their admissions guarantee to the CSU honored, irrespective of where they reside in the state. Our next recommendation centers around creating an intersegmental committee on transfer. As many of you are well aware, and this is not something that we own as a badge of honor, rather this is an area of frustration and disappointment for our state. The state of California is one of only a couple states in the nation that lacks an intersegmental coordinating entity. That intersegmental coordinating entity, if it existed, would be charged with ensuring the alignment, coordination, collaboration, and dialogue of our systems of public post-secondary education in a way that helps better meet the needs of students in the state. And yet, without that, we have a void that will require the establishment of a committee that can deeply dive into the alignment and growth necessary on the associate degree for transfer pathway. We want to ensure that we have, through this intersegmental committee, the ability to continually review and assess data towards progress in meeting the goals and benchmarks that we articulated as part of the bold intersegmental vision that is necessary for this work in the state. And we have to do everything we can to ensure that part of that oversight work is the communications necessary to create equity in opportunity and access to information for students across the field. And finally, we have to utilize the cradle to career data system. As many of you know, Governor Newsom has invested in ensuring that for the first time, California build out an intersegmental data system that gives us the ability to measure student progress from kindergarten to college, cradle to college, and career. We have to use this data system to illuminate data gaps that currently exist so that we better understand the trajectory of student experience and what can be done to eliminate roadblocks that students experience at key points along their transfer path. We have to develop an equity index that ensures that the data we have gathered is disaggregated by race and ethnicity, and that we are using that data to inform the policies and practices, and yes, the state investments to close and eliminate persistent racial equity gaps, ensuring that the truly student-centered transfer pathway envisioned in the state of California is finally actualized for students across the state. So with that, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from 3 leaders in the field of community college transfer and higher ed alignment. I'm very proud to say that each of the leaders that you're going to be hearing from today have unique perspectives based on the work that they're doing on campuses day in, day out. The first panelist that we'll hear from today is Dr. Abdi Malik Bull, who is a racial equity leader, an award-winning professor, and also the transfer center director in the counseling department at San Diego City College, as well as a lecturer at San Diego State University. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll also hear from Dr. Sonia Christian, who is a racial equity champion and courageous leader that is known across the state. We're proud to say that she's a member of the Campaign for College Opportunities Board and newly appointed chancellor of the Kern Community College District. But prior to that, she was president of Bakersfield College, where she led much of the statewide work happening in guided pathways and elevating transfer reform efforts for the Central Valley. And finally, we'll hear from Valerie Johnson. Valerie Johnson represents the heartbeat of everything we do at the Campaign for College Opportunity, a student leader who emerged as one of our greatest allies in our efforts over the course of multiple years. She's a graduate from the University of California, but she made significant impact first in her role as the Transfer Student Affairs Officer for the UC Student Association. And I have to share, much to our pleasure, she will be the new field representative in the office of Senator Nancy Skinner. So she is a true post-secondary education success story for the state of California. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us.
Thank you.
I want to begin with you, Dr. Bull. I would love to hear your initial reactions to some of the stark and troubling data that was just presented.
Well, thank you first and foremost, and thank you for the campaign for always having a racial equity lens. You know, one of my favorite statements this past few years is budgets are value statements. And the fact that the most glaring aspect of this report is we could save 11.5 million a year if we did it right. Imagine all those resources that could pull it into more counselors, more faculty, more support services for these students. I think that to me was one of the most biggest takeaways. Also, the fact that, although more than half of Latinx graduates are awarded ADTs, the fact that they still have the lowest bachelor degree attainment rate, to me, is troublesome, given the demographics that we live in California. Another glaring point is that, Black Californian community college students are enrolling in high numbers, but still not completing a degree. So I think some of these racial equity lens, some of the resources, some of the budgetary issues deeply, for me, are some things that I'm kind of taken aback by, and the lack of efficiency and the lack of streamlining and what that could actually present in terms of change, transformational change for our system, and actually implementing what the intent of the master plan was, which is everyone to have access to higher education in an equitable fashion. So I'm thinking, how can we be more efficient and effective with our resources, but also having that racial equity lens to make sure that a rising tide doesn't lift all boats. We have to make sure that we were very, very intentional and deliberate in how we do that.
Beautifully said. We're going to go next to Dr. Christian.
Well, the report was really very well done. Jesse and Vikash are a rock star. And what a tremendous success story 1440 has been for higher education. A powerful legislative tool in defining these pathways, the ADTs, to ensure that institutions, both community colleges and CSUs, treated these pathways like open freeways that were easy, were efficient and effective for students to get on and move directly towards baccalaureate completion. The focus was to make sure that more of our Latino students, our Black students, racial equity imperative. And then you read all the good news, and then we get to the not so good news, and the report was unapologetic about it. The truth is, as someone who has implemented the transfer pathways with a sense of focus, I kind of realized that there were problems that we still needed to fix. But reading the report, it was so clear. And our commitment, the equity imperative, was truly very clear. In the report, what I saw that we had to go beyond the reliance on a single college approach if we wanted our equity imperative actions to match the equity words that we speak. Our structural work needs to go deeper than what we currently have in place. So reading Chutes and Ladders from the lens of a president of a community college who has been working on this agenda, I asked myself, what should community colleges do with what we know now? And there are two things that really struck me as absolutely urgent, and I jotted down that, Jesse used the phrase urgent imperative. We must build out our ADT pathways at each of the colleges. This is truly equivalent to creating those freeways to baccalaureate completion, because if we don't have them, then students get hurt. They automatically don't see a freeway to get on to that bachelor's completion. And the report talks about the Wheelhouse 2020 publication that found that community colleges with fewer ADT offerings had larger populations of Black students, while campuses with larger proportions of Latinx students tended to have more ADT offerings. So building out those ADTs is absolutely imperative. It is now. We can't wait for it to happen in an ad hoc fashion. And the second piece is really to shine a light on these pathways and make them the preferred pathways for students in an intentional manner. The word intentional was used repeatedly and by Dr. Bull. We cannot leave equity to chance. This is not an issue of CTE programs versus transfer programs, my dear friends. I'm a strong supporter of our strong workforce programs. I'm a strong supporter of the high roads training programs. At Bakersfield College, we offer welding programs, and our CTE programs are strong. What this is about is being very clear with our transfer pathways for our students who want those transfer pathways. We must make these pathways the default pathways for those students. If not, it gets hidden from them and they can't find them in order to realize their goals. So I'll conclude, Jesse, before I toss it over to you by saying, to me, this is clearly an equity imperative.
Thank you. That was so beautifully said, between Dr. Bull saying the rising tide does not lift all boats, and we have to recognize this as we undertake this extremely important work, to you underscoring the intentionality with which we have to approach the racial equity imperative. I'm so appreciative of your insights. We're going to turn it over to Valerie Johnson next for student perspective. Really, Valerie, I would love to hear your reaction to the findings, recognizing firsthand the challenges that students are facing across the state.
Thank you so much, Jesse. And reading the report, I was both surprised and not at the same time. As a student, having been on both a community college campus and transferred to a UC, I've seen, and interacted with students of a very big variety of backgrounds and interests. And what remained the same a lot of the times was the struggles that we all faced to reach our goals and get where we wanted to go. And so seeing some of the data in this report saying, hey, these students are trying to reach their goals, and here's how little are actually able to do it in the timeline that we promised them they can do it in. Because When I was planning my higher education journey, it was always like, oh, okay, you can do community college in 2 years, and then you just get to transfer, and then you'll live your university dreams and make your great life for yourself. And while that's the reality for some, it is definitely, and as we've seen in the report, not the reality for the large majority of students. And having seen that at community college, I personally have friends, students that I've taken classes with who have been in community college 6+ years. But another point that stuck with me a lot from the report was, the extra money that would be left over if we were to, make some of these changes, make the ADT the preferred pathway, help students finish earlier, because that money is so important, and money is what we put our money towards, like was said, is an expression of our values, and students deserve to have fully funded services like EOP, like the Black Recruitment and Retention Center at UC Berkeley was almost entirely student run because, marginalized students of color were not given the resources that they needed to support themselves. And we saw that lead to lower retention rates. And so what I was really excited for about this report, I guess I'll wrap up my little tangent, but students deserve this money. And if these changes are going to be made, then the students who are going to benefit most are going to be marginalized students of color. And if we are to ever claim that our, community colleges are modes of equity building, then we need to put our money where our mouths are. And this is a great way to do that. And also, I think that being able to see students take less classes to get to where they need to go and waste less time and therefore save more money is going to be such a beautiful thing to see. And I hope that it becomes the norm and not the exception.
So well stated, Valerie. And actually in the chat, one of our students who was featured in the transfer report said, Jamal said it took him 10 years to transfer from LA Community College to UCLA. Think of the lost earnings, the lost ability to contribute to family, also the cost to the state, right? In that time to degree. It is both a moral and fiscal imperative, and I'm so appreciative of how you addressed that. So we are going to do one more question to you all, and then we're actually going to take some questions from our participants before hearing from Assemblymember Berman. In your opinion, what is the single greatest policy lever in strengthening transfer with a focus on finally ensuring racial equity for students across the state? And I'm actually going to switch it up and start with Dr. Christian on this.
Since we're running out of time, I would just focus in the bill that is going to be discussed, is the piece that we've got to build out our ADTs. And for students who are transfer students, that we need to have those ADTs as the default pathway for the students. This is absolutely not compromising our agenda and the options for students. And we have discussed this among community college practitioners, presidents, and faculty. It is just, if that is hidden from students, the students who don't find it are those students who have historically been minoritized. So we've got to, number one, grow out our ADTs, align it with CSU, with faculty to faculty conversations, and those need to be the default pathways for our transfer students.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christian. Valerie?
I will agree with Dr. Christian on this one, and also say that those pathways need to include a reduction in required course units for students who are always ending up taking more than the 60 they need to transfer, and taking that extra time that costs them a lot of money.
And Dr. Bull?
I'm gonna say something pretty radical. Maybe I might get in trouble for it, but oh well. I think
we like radical thoughts.
I think we need to really start, either from an incentive or punitive measure, look at the resource allocation for those who are performing well, increase support, and those who are not, call them out or call them in rather. And I think we need to start identifying accountability, how that looks like. I like the freeway idea, but when we build freeways, we got the carpool lane. We've got, but what's looking like the 405, 12 o'clock on a Friday right now, traffic jam, right? And so we're over here backlogged. And when you exit, you shouldn't be finding out 18 ways to come back. And you should literally just hop off and hop right back on. And so I'm noticing is there's programs that there's not a clear delineated curriculum alignment, and students are confused. So for example, if you're a kinesiology major, but you want to do pre-physical therapy, it's not an ADT. You have to take physics courses, and that requires, college algebra and maybe a pre-calc class. But then if you're the regular kinesiology ADT and you're a fitness specialist, you're just thinking I'm doing my stats class and you're done. And so is realignment, how do you come back to that maze in case you have that career change? That's very instrumental. So I think knowledge, resources, career exploration, and clear knowledge of that. And also on the back end, holding these UCs and CSUs accountable. You can have all the knowledge and everything you want, and then you hop on that freeway and there's a traffic jam, right? And so here at San Diego State, we've got 60,000 applicants, 6,000 seats. And I don't want to go, my students don't want to transfer to, Humboldt. So what do I do now, right? And so that's also a very, very integral part of the process.
Thank you, Dr. Bull. And we cannot discount the capacity issue. So I'm going to go to a couple quick questions before we hear from Assemblymember Berman from participants. These are questions that have come up from multiple different individuals. So the first question is for you, Vikash, Dr. Reddy. How many colleges are at full implementation of the associate degree for transfer?
My video has been disabled, but I will answer that as start my video. There we go. 27 have currently, and so we define full implementation just quickly. I'll note as if a college has a terminal associate degree in a particular top code, a particular major, and there is an approved transfer model curriculum in that particular major, then the college should also be offering an ADT there. So I will also note that does not require a community college to create an ADT if they are not offering an AA or AS in a particular degree. And so 27 colleges have met that definition. And you can find more information on this in Appendix A of the report, which starts on page 41, including a list where we've actually looked at campus by campus ADTs that are missing.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Reddy. This next question is for Dr. Bull. What can college leaders do to call out racial equity gaps and improve outcomes, particularly for Black students?
I think one of the ways in which we can do that is your other report I'm a reference, Follow the Money, is obviously having a racial equity lens on things, highlighting successful institutions. I know UC Riverside, for example, there's a report that came back a few years ago that it was the #1 institution for Black college transfer students. If I have a Black college student that wants to transfer, I'm like, hey, this is the institution you want to check out because of the feedback they're getting, right? So we want to highlight marquee programs, we want to incentivize them, we want to reward them. And I think if we continue to do that, hopefully institutions will respond to that and look at those best practices and model them at their local universities. I like to be more of a good guy than a bad guy. I want to highlight the bad institutions, but we also need some type of a report card. You mentioned an institutional equity index, right? Mm-hmm. That has to be highlighted with the resources available as well to help that single parent that doesn't want to leave the city but wants to transfer as well. So what are the resources that they're providing?
Perfect. Thank you so much. And this last question before going to Assemblymember Berman is, how does the ADT pathway impact older students re-entering higher ed after working? Dr. Christian?
Well, I mean, the older student population is a problem that we have been wrestling with as a whole state. And the way we have tried to address it locally at our college is to really treat the entry back into college as on-ramps back into degree programs. So when we're looking at skill builder types of non-credit programming, when we're working with the unemployment department, when individuals file in for unemployment, and we meet those individuals and get them back into college and into training, we try not to see those as sort of short-term, but really look at it as a larger landscape and see how we can bring them back in so they can get employed right away. And then start looking at connecting back into pathways that provide that economic mobility. Vikash did a real nice job talking about the disparity in the workforce and looking at the racial equity disparities into who are the higher earners. And so really connecting back into those degree completion pathways is an intentionality we must build into our skill builder training for adult populations.
Wonderfully articulated. Thank you, Dr. Christian. So at this time, I have the pleasure of introducing Assemblymember Mark Berman. Many of you are familiar with the Assemblymember's work. He was the chair of the Select Committee on the Master Plan for Higher Education, and since then has become one of the most knowledgeable members of the state legislature on a variety of critical higher education issues. This year, he is tackling the Herculean task of authoring several pieces of ambitious student-centered legislation aimed at strengthening pathways for students across the state and ensuring that they have the necessary financial supports to be able to reach their college dreams. Assemblymember Berman, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jesse. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come and chat with everyone today. And I wish I'd signed on earlier because I just caught the last about 10 minutes of the prior panel and learned a lot just from that small snippet. So my ledge director, Ellen Green, has been on the whole time, and I'll have to get a debrief from her about other great points that were made and ideas that we can take into future legislative years. But as Jesse said, I'm Mark Berman. I represent Northern Santa Clara County and Southern San Mateo County in the California State Assembly. And over the last 4 years, I've chaired the Select Committee on the Master Plan for Higher Education. Before I begin, again, I want to thank the Campaign for College Opportunity for your leadership and advocacy on transfer. Your timely report highlights the challenges that students face and what we as policymakers can do to improve transfer for students. Higher education is critical to the upward economic mobility of Californians, enabling students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds to graduate into well-paying jobs and create a better future for them and their families. However, as we know all too well, not all Californians have the same chance to obtain the benefits of a higher education. I want to make sure that these benefits reach all students, and I see transfer as a key way to make this happen. As chair of the Select Committee on the Master Plan, I've held informational hearings on the status of our higher education system. And throughout these hearings, students over and over again brought up the issue of transfer. Their message was loud and clear. The transfer process is too complex, confusing, and difficult to navigate. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, 70% of first-time community college students say they want to transfer to a four-year institution. However, as the campaign's report shows, students are still taking far too long to transfer. 2.5% transferred in 2 years or less, 23% transferred in 4 years or less, and 40% transferred in 6 years or less. If a student goes directly to a four-year institution, the goal is that they graduate in 4 years. However, too many transfer students are spending at least 4 or 6 years at community college before even getting to a four-year institution. This is unacceptable and it needs to change. This is also an equity issue because transfer students are more often Black, Latino, and first-generation college students. As California begins to recover from the pandemic, now more than ever, it's critical to increase degree attainment, improve time to degree, and close racial equity gaps. This is why I'm authoring 2 bills on transfer and have partnered with the Campaign for College Opportunity, the Lieutenant Governor, and student groups. My first bill, AB 928, would transform the transfer process through 3 significant student-centered provisions, which include many of the recommendations from today's report. First, the bill will create an intersegmental implementation committee to provide a permanent venue to facilitate intersegmental coordination and greater state level accountability for implementation of the associate degree for transfer, and to focus on improving transfer outcomes for all students. Second, the bill sets a target date for CSU and UC to establish a singular lower division general education pathway that meets transfer admission to both segments. Going from 2 general education pathways to 1 makes it easier for students to apply to both CSU and UC and keep their options open. Third, and I believe Dr. Shucks, I lost her last name, but the Dr. Christensen, I believe, alluded to this in an answer a little bit ago. But third, the bill requires that community college students be placed on an associate degree for transfer pathway where one exists for their major. Since the ADT guarantees admission to the CSU system and participating private institutions, this provision will maximize the probability that a student will transfer and complete a bachelor's degree in a timely manner. Importantly, students can opt out and are empowered to choose what is best for them and their educational goals. This comprehensive transfer bill recognizes the troubling reality that the status quo is failing our students and that we can do better. My second bill, AB 1111, will create a student-facing common course numbering system at California community colleges to make it easier to transfer. This means that comparable courses would have the same course number at all community colleges. Many students take courses at multiple community colleges within a district or even across districts. Without common course numbering, it is harder for students to plan out a clear path to earning their degree. California currently has what's called the Course Identification Numbering System, the CID system, which is a way to identify comparable common courses. However, this is a kind of a back-end system that students aren't aware of, and courses that have the same CID number are still numbered differently. For example, at Pasadena City College, college algebra for STEM majors is labeled Math 003. At Cypress College, it's Math 141C. And at Napa Valley College, it's Math 106. There are many more examples just for this course, just for college algebra for STEM majors. It should be no surprise that differences in these course numbers can unintentionally set students back and is a barrier to timely transfer. Students may not know whether they are taking the right courses and may accidentally repeat some if they take classes at more than one community college. This means that students could be paying for a course in both time and money that will not count towards their transfer requirements. Having the same course number for all comparable courses at all community colleges would reduce unnecessary confusion, ease advising, reduce excess credit accumulation, and make it easier for community college students to transfer and earn their degree, saving students both time and money. AB 928 and AB 1111 have both received unanimous bipartisan support, which was a surprise to me. We didn't expect that going in. And will next be heard in the Senate Education Committee in July. And today's report makes the case and provides the evidence that state action, like these 2 bills, is needed to improve transfer. So the work continues, but I am very hopeful that we have the momentum and support to transform transfer. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Berman. Again, we're grateful to have you as a champion and ally in this critical work. I want to take the opportunity again to thank our tremendous panelists for sharing their time and expertise this afternoon. And I would be remiss if I did not thank both the foundations that have supported the ability to research and publish Chutes or Ladders, and the incredible team that we have at the Campaign for College Opportunity that have contributed to various aspects of publishing this report. Thank you to Dr. Reddy for your co-authorship, but I also want to put out a huge thank you to Josefina Flores Morales for the work she did to meaning make of a complex set of data. Again, the Campaign for College Opportunity will be coming to you in the weeks and months with opportunities to impact transformational transfer reform. You can access our full report at www.collegecampaign.org, and we ask that you disseminate the report with your colleagues. We also will make this recording available if you'd like to view it at a later time. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. And we look forward to rolling up our sleeves together, recognizing the urgency of now and the intentionality with which we need to approach racial equity-minded reforms so that transfer is not a game of chutes or ladders. It is not reliant on luck. It will provide equal opportunity to students across the state and have payoffs for generations to come. Thank you.